Hello, I'm Robert Horton, and I'm here to introduce another session of Scarecrow Academy, the film discussion series presented by the nonprofit Scarecrow Video in Seattle. I'm a member of the National Society of Film Critics, and I'm the programmer historian in residence at Scarecrow, and it's been my pleasure to lead our Scarecrow Academy discussions. Our current semester for 2021 is called The Art in Noir, Film Noir and the Director. We meet on Saturday afternoons at 2 p.m. Pacific time. The meetings are free via Zoom, and our next and final session for this semester is going to be a discussion of the 1955 film noir Kiss Me Deadly, directed by Robert Aldrich. That will take place on Saturday, April 17th. You can register for this event by finding the Scarecrow Academy page at Scarecrow's website. Click on the appropriate link. You will be sent an email that will allow you to register for it. You can also find out the best way to watch the movie before our discussion. Of course, you can always rent the film from Scarecrow Video as well. So here I'm going to introduce the movie. I will just say a couple things about the director as well. Kiss Me Deadly is based on a 1952 novel by Mickey Spillane, whose name is sort of starting to fade from being a household word, but at the time he was enormously popular for a series of rather brutal, hard-boiled thrillers, most of them featuring a private eye named Mike Hammer, also featuring a greater than usual amount of sadomasochism for the era. And by the way, isn't Kiss Me Deadly a weird and kind of inspired title? It's been around all my life. I've never really thought about, what it meant. But if you start thinking about it, it leads into, I think, some of the bleak territory that the film explores. To adapt this novel, Robert Aldrich and the screenwriter, A.I. Bezarides, had to deal with the fact that they didn't like the material that much or the main character. So they turned the movie into something of a critique of this character, actually, as they go along. For instance, I'll throw out one moment in the film that it strikes me as very typical as an Aldrich kind of detail for how specific it is and how violent it is. And it's this scene in which Hammer is trying to get a key from another character who, like so many others in the movie, is looking to find out what his piece of the pie is going to be in exchange. And as this man reaches into a desk drawer to get something, Hammer reaches down and smashes the man's fingers repeatedly in this desk drawer by shoving it shut. And it draws this pitiful, unusually painful howl from the man. Pitiful is only the raspy-voiced character actor Percy Helton can be pitiful. And during this scene, Aldrich uses a couple of very, very quick, very brief cuts to a close-up of Mike Hammer's face. And his expression is a grin of bestial pleasure at this sadistic action. It's just pure delight in cruelty. And you just see it for a second, a couple of times. And it's so repulsive, that we have to recoil from it. And little touches like that are sprinkled throughout this movie. And in case there's any temptation at all to identify with Mike Hammer at any point. And I think this is consistent with Robert Aldrich's generally inquisitive and progressive attitude in his movies. About this time, he also made a movie called Apache, which is one of a handful of 1950s films that were sympathetic to Native American stories. He directed The Big Knife, a very caustic Hollywood fable, a very jaundiced view of the industry, and also Attack, which is a very skeptical, hard-edged war movie. Aldrich was an intelligent and articulate man. He worked his way up through the movie business, despite coming from a background of real privilege. He was born in 1918 into a very prominent family in Rhode Island. His grandfather, Nelson Aldrich, was a wealthy financier, but also a U.S. senator, and a very powerful one, actually, a very influential one, whose daughter married John D. Rockefeller Jr., thus making Robert Aldrich and Nelson Rockefeller first cousins. So Aldrich was born into immense wealth and power, but he turned his back on it because he wanted to go into the movie business rather than high finance or something. And also because he found at a fairly early age that it turned out he was a Democrat and not a rock-ribbed Republican like the rest of his family. So he was basically disinherited and came into the Hollywood system. He did use a little bit of family pull just to get in, but he came in as an assistant director. And that's actually an unusual way for directors to become directors. It's not the customary way. But for almost a decade or so, he was the assistant to a really unusual group of quite fascinating people who were the directors above him, including a couple of key film noir directors, Joseph Losey and Abraham Polonsky, both blacklisted, as well as Aldrich assisted Jean Renoir during his Hollywood sojourn, Max O'Fuels, Louis Milestone, and William Wellman was another one. And Aldrich was the assistant director on Charlie Chaplin's film Limelight. And at that point, he was ready, clearly, to graduate to the director's chair himself. TV was just getting going then. Aldrich did a little bit of that, did some low-budget stuff in film. Fairly quickly made a couple of pictures with Burt Lancaster as the star. Apache was one of those, and Vera Cruz. And Kiss Me Deadly followed shortly thereafter. So the screenwriter, Bezarides, once said that he wrote the screenplay of Kiss Me Deadly very quickly because he didn't particularly like being around the company of the novel for that long. And after the fact, he said that Mickey Spillane expressed considerable disgust at what they had done with his book. Along with shifting the emphasis, as we were saying, kind of turning the book in on itself, the film adds a lot of things to the novel, including the entire atomic theme that you see in the film. That explosive storyline, by the way, I think is one of the reasons that people who like to chart the progress of film noir and separate it into eras and things enjoy rounding off the first great era of noir with Kiss Me Deadly as a kind of rounding off point, partly because the style of noir had changed at this point, and partly because when you get to the ending of Kiss Me Deadly, well, you know, what really can follow that at that point? The film is constructed as a labyrinth, I think very consciously, a series of short scenes arranged around many characters and a multitude of locations. Lots of shots of circling staircases and checkerboard floors, all leading this traditional figure of the private eye, or in this case, a rather unlikable and corrupted private eye, through this series of fairly baffling connections that he really doesn't understand until it's too late in the film. It's funny, in the opening sequence, he sarcastically says to the hitchhiker he picks up, "Oh, what I don't know won't hurt me, huh?" And it becomes true at a certain point. He's actually screwed whether he knows something or doesn't know something in the end. Some of the classic noir films follow a fairly conventional format, and they're very satisfying because of that. But things are different now. The lush photographic style of peak era film noir now looks as though it were lit by a police interrogation lamp. There are some rather stark close-ups in Kiss Me Deadly that embody that. At least since The Lady from Shanghai, noir has been signaling the idea that the center no longer holds. And the world of Kiss Me Deadly, coming along less than a decade after that film, shows that things are indeed flying apart in a very unpleasant and even apocalyptic way. We will look at the way Aldrich creates a visual sense of that confusing labyrinth and his attitude toward violence as well, which feels distinctly more extreme than previous noir films. We're entering a new phase here by 1955, in which the punishment doled out in this criminal world is truly painful. There's also a curious thread in the movie about high art, classical music and poetry, somehow coming into collision with the modern world, which I guess is a rather unexpected idea for a Mike Hammer movie, maybe. The cast is led by Ralph Meeker, very interesting actor who had kind of flirted with the method school at the end of the 40s. In fact, he replaced Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire as Stanley Kowalski in the Broadway production of that. And Meeker does a really careful job in this film of, I think, of not enlisting sympathy for his character. The movie is crammed with character actors, just very flavorful people. Some of them had been around for a while, some of them at the very beginning of their wonderful careers. The opening credits make a point of saying that the film is introducing three actresses in key roles in the movie, one of which was the recently late Cloris Leachman in the movie's unforgettable opening sequence. We'll talk about all of those folks on Saturday. And the opening sequence, by the way, the film begins with the credits rolling in reverse order from the way that you're usually seeing them, as though rewinding a tape to try to make sense of something after you've watched it. But as the ending of this movie makes clear, there's no going back and rewinding after this. So please join us as we search for the great What's It and conclude our 10-week inquiry into film noir and the director on Saturday, April 17th, with the Scarecrow Academy discussion of the 1955 film noir classic, Robert Aldrich's Kiss Me Deadly.